Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Creating and Funding Robust IT Processes, which is put on this afternoon by Building Perspective and Fair Grant Writing. Our presenters today are going to be Vani Pasupathy, Principal of Building Perspective, and Igor Chigrin, Principal of Fair Grant Writing. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Vani to take over and take us through today's topic, Creating and Funding Robust IT Processes. Vani.
Fantastic. Thank you, Colin. Let me just get you guys set up and share my screen. Great. And I hope you're able to see that, Colin. Just interject and let me know if anything is amiss. You never know with this technology stuff, which is exactly the topic of today's conversation.
Yeah, you're good to go.
I'm good to go. Great. Wonderful. Great. So let's get started talking about how to drive corporate growth with robust IT processes. We're going to be talking a lot about technology adoption and some of the ways that you can go around evaluating what kind of technology you need and making intelligent choices about that. So I'll start off by saying a little bit about myself and my own experience. As Colin mentioned, I'm the managing partner at a company called Building Perspective, Inc. And we're a boutique management consulting firm in Toronto, Canada, and we're experiencing some cold weather right now for those of you who might be in the area with us. My business transformation experience is cultivated over the last 18 years. I've been a process and quality leader and operations manager in a variety of companies, different industries, different sizes, anywhere from small startups of 20 people right up to very large multinational, multi-geographic corporations, and technology adoption can look very different at those extreme different scales, right? So we're going to talk about that and how there are still some fundamental principles you need to apply to really pick the right technology. So over that course of time, I've picked up a couple of tools and tricks in the area of Lean Six Sigma, strategy deployment, technology adoption, which we're going to be talking about a lot today, and even advanced facilitation, which does come into technology selection as well, as we'll discuss a little later on. So let's talk about where you might be as a company at the moment. You might have been going through a lot of challenges in the past year around your technology, and you might be asking yourself some key questions. So some of the questions we often hear go something like this. I keep hearing about digital transformation, but where's the starting point for my business given my legacy systems? So a lot of people are just still fighting the basics. You know, they have manual and repetitive data entry. They've got a lack of visibility and tracking. They've got inflexible IT systems that are old. And yet you hear all this buzz about digital transformation. So a lot of people are battling and trying to figure out for themselves, how do we get started? Another popular question we hear is, it's not just our systems, but our processes and people too. How do I tackle this? And that's a complex problem, right? Because if you talk to folks who are in the technology space, they will sometimes act like everything can be solved with a tool. You know, every process is in a system, but that's not true. You know, our materials, our raw materials flow outside of IT systems. Our people interact with the systems, but they bring their own biases to things. So there's often a very complex relationship between system and process and people, and peeling that apart and figuring out what to do can be quite challenging. The other piece of it is, how can I ensure a healthy ROI on my technology selections and implementation? So I read somewhere a stat that 40% of companies don't go ahead with their technology implementation because of uncertain ROI. So if you don't know what your return on investment for that technology is going to be, it can be easy to avoid making that leap. It can be scary to make it. And so hopefully in today's conversation, we can remove some of that fear and talk about how to navigate around some of those things. So when you adopt technologies, there's always some benefits and some risks. And if you go out there on the internet or you educate yourself, a lot of people talk about the benefit side quite heavily. So there's some great things that you get out of automation, out of adopting different technologies. Productivity, you will get greater productivity from a lot of these tools. Greater production capacity if you're looking at the kind of equipment that automates, say, your manufacturing. Reduced errors. You know, when you're going from systems that have a lot of repetitive data entry, or you don't have a single source of data, this can be huge just to consolidate that and put a system in place. Reduced operating costs. That's another reason that people go after technology implementations. Getting scalable systems. So you may have grown up your company in a very organic way, and so you may not have put in all the systems really thinking in a forward-looking fashion. And if you experience some rapid growth, you could now be in a place where, you know, your systems just can't keep up. Greater sales. You know, being able to follow up on those leads, follow up on those prospects, and having the triggers and tools and personal management software can really be a big difference for you in your sales efforts. And the last and final is better customer experience. Especially now with the pandemic, everybody is online. They're expecting a great digital experience. You know, even my parents who never knew Zoom or never heard of it before this last year, or have become tech savvy. So the entire market has changed, and people are expecting you to be up to date, have great websites, have great e-commerce, and all of those sorts of things. So there are definitely some great benefits out of getting technology. On the risk side, there's some risks to weigh out when you're adopting technology. So one is the wrong selection of technology. So we do see some people picking the wrong tool to solve the wrong problem, just out of not understanding what's out there and what each technology is about. Costly implementations. Everybody's heard about big implementations that just seem to, you know, be improperly scoped, or there's scope creep, and all of a sudden you're paying this huge amount of money that you didn't expect. Insufficient ROI, we talked a little bit about that. So return on investment, not understanding what it is, not knowing if this is worth the effort. And then finally, missing simpler solutions. So sometimes when we've got our narrowed vision on just a technology solution, we can miss a very simple people or process solution that could have solved the problem in a lot cheaper way, right? So it's very important for us to weigh these benefits and risks when we're considering what to do in our technology journeys. So today's buzzwords, wow, there's so many buzzwords out there right now. Enterprise resource planning systems, robotic process automation, the Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, 3D printing. My God, how do you keep up? There's a lot of buzzwords out there, and technology is a very attractive, sexy topic to talk about, right? So everybody wants to say we're on the cutting edge, we're in the leading thing, and we know what these words mean. They can be very confusing, okay? And some of them are based on, some of them are not even talking about a technology, they're talking about where the technology is done. So enterprise resource planning software, it's about having a single source of data to manage all your information. Robotic process automation, great, a new way of automating where you can replicate the human, you know, keystrokes of a person. And you know, when we see these words, sometimes it sounds like you're expecting this robot to be sitting at a computer doing it, and it's really not. It's not like that, but it is replicating some of that human behavior. Internet of Things, you know, sensors to connect different things and collect and monitor information. And some of these things were available in the previous form already, but now they've become cheaper and they've become easier to access. So it's become a bigger thing. Big data, that's a method of how you analyze data nowadays in volume. Artificial intelligence can be as simple as you know, a computer that plays chess, or complicated like a self-driving car. Cloud computing, it's all about computing in not on your server, but somewhere else. And 3D printing, new manufacturing technology. So I'm just touching on a few things, but you can just imagine, like, if you're out there and trying to find something, you could really be confused in today's terminology. So with everyone being so busy and everyone trying to get ahead, it's very easy to fall into what I call the solution trap, okay? The internet is a great source of information, but it's also a great source of misinformation. There's a lot of information out there, and it doesn't always help guide you as to what to pick. It's very common for us to go into the internet, our favorite, pocket consultant, and when you see that, they've described your problem, you immediately want to purchase that solution. So plug and play solutions sound really tempting. It's like, hey, this sounds like it solves my problem. I've got lots of business problems. I need to just plug this in and move on. And on top of that, you've got aggressive vendors who do call you. We see this all the time with our clients. And when we are hired sometimes to help people select a technology, and I don't blame the vendors. They're trying to make a sale. Hey, we're all trying to make a living. So I get it. So they want to get in and they want to make a quick sale. And sometimes they're okay with making that sale to you just because you like them and not necessarily because you like their product, right? So that can be tough too, is just to try to navigate that quickness. And like I mentioned before, talking about technologies in fashion, it's sexy, it's awesome because everybody's doing it, and we want to be on the cutting edge with our companies. So it really gets brought up quite a bit. But what is it that is the missing link in all of this? Okay, so what is it about just grabbing a solution and implementing that is going to cause an issue? So let's talk about the first thing. So the first thing is the bigger problem. And what do I mean by the bigger problem? So often when we are looking for solution, our intuition says as soon as we see a problem, we should go look for what's the solution. So I'll give you an example. When you're hungry, you look for food. When you're sleepy, you look for a bed. When you're bored, you look for your cell phone, right? Now, that may lead to a quick solution, but it can also lead to obesity, it can lead to lethargy, it can lead to attention deficit disorder, right? So instead of looking for the solution right away, what if when you're hungry, you started asking questions about your diet or your lifestyle? What if when you are bored, instead of reaching for that phone, you asked broader questions about mental health so that you can come up with better answers? So in a company, a lot of the things we're seeing are just symptoms of bigger problems. And if we don't stop and ask what those bigger problems are, we can be really misled into picking technologies that don't really work for us and that don't serve our bigger problem, and that they become a kind of band-aid solution. So the first thing to think about is when you see a symptom, what is the bigger problem? Is this part of a systematic issue? Is this happening in isolation in one department? Some systems and technology systems go all the way across an organization, like email or ERP systems. Some things are very targeted to one department, like automated manufacturing equipment. So it's really important to understand what the bigger situation is. The second thing you want to do is, once you figure that out, you want to be able to follow those breadcrumbs to get to that bigger problem. And that's actually not that easy. So we can talk in a very loose way now with these simple examples, like, okay, ask questions about your mental health and dig deeper when you're having that itch of boredom, right? But following those breadcrumbs in a company is not that easy. And what do I mean by breadcrumbs? I mean, when you see symptoms, you want to follow that until you get to the root causes of things. You want to follow that until you figure out what is the bigger problem, what is the global situation I'm trying to get to the bottom of. And that's actually not an easy thing to do. And there are some reliable methods, one of which I'm going to talk about, called Lean Six Sigma, which is a problem-solving methodology. It allows you to go in and look at business problems and really follow the breadcrumbs till you get to the root of the problem. When you get to the guts of that problem, that's when you need to start thinking about what is the solution. Okay, and by the time you get to that level of detail, you will know what the solution is. There won't be any ambiguity about it. So that's what systematic approaches like Lean Six Sigma give you. Now, Lean Six Sigma is basically a process improvement methodology. It's a methodology to systematically, with data, with analysis, get to the root cause of business problems, okay? The last piece of it is that process comes first. So sometimes my technology friends don't like it when I say this, but what's missing in the conversation today is that people talk about technology like, hey, I want to get this ERP system, what's the ROI? Okay, I want to get that technology. and they make the leap to ROI. Well, ROI for technology doesn't exist without process improvement. That's a very potent statement, okay? Your technology has no ROI by itself. It's only when it's in the context of a process that you've improved that you can figure out what the return on investment is. So if you put in a CRM, a customer relationship management tool, to help your salespeople, there's a process, a sales process where people generate leads, where they create invoices, where they get that out to the customer and land a deal. That 4 or 5 step process is the one that you're speeding up. So you have to be able to say that, hey, I'm trying to improve lead time for that process, and this is how much I want to improve it by. And by the way that I do that is this tool, and it may be only one part of the solution. So if you don't understand that process context, you'll never be able to figure out ROI. So it's kind of a red herring when people ask the question, what is the return on investment for this technology? There's no real such thing. You've got to go deeper, find out what the business problem is, find out which process you're improving, and then go from there to calculate that ROI. Okay, so let's get into what is a good way to do system selection. So I'm going to give you a simple recipe to go about it. And this is what we use with all of our clients. Okay, we start out by analyzing the cross-functional business process. That often involves getting people together and looking end to end and seeing what are all the different processes that have problems, that are showing symptoms. And once you do that, you can get to the root of the problem. So we ask a lot of questions. Why is this happening? How often is it happening? Who's involved when it's happening? And we go straight to the source of people to get to the root of that problem. The next thing you want to do is, once you understand it at that level, you want to identify both process and technology solutions simultaneously. So as we talked about earlier, one of the pitfalls of technology adoption is you might miss something that's simpler. Some things are very easy to implement physically and much harder to implement in a system. Inventory management for some of the smaller companies I worked with is easily done using physical cards to show you when your stock levels are at a certain level. Now, doing that same process in some sort of software is much more complicated and much more expensive. So you have to weigh out if a process solution will work or if you need that technology solution. Finally, once you do decide you need a technology solution, you want to turn that into a systematic set of requirements that you can share with other people. And those requirements really come from the exact business problems you need to solve. Finally, you need a way to select vendors intelligently. Okay, there's a lot of quick sales that people want to make. You need to have a systematic approach to compare and contrast them so that you can pick the right one for you. So talking a little bit more about that, we talked about how you analyze your business processes. So one of the key tools you might use to do that is process mapping, right? So you might want to go in or have someone work with you to go in and map out all your business processes and identify systematically where some of those trouble spots are, so you can understand your bottlenecks. In that in that process of process mapping, you're going to identify correct technology and process solutions. You're going to do the technology requirements piece. That's going to become apparent. And as I mentioned before, you will then be able to calculate the ROI. That's kind of the first half of that journey. It's really understanding your current state and taking the time to do that before you jump to saying how you'd like it to be. After that, once you've got your technology requirements, you really want to have a systematic way to compare different vendors. Okay, so technology vendors all quote their product differently, and if you go on gut feel, you're going to go for the wrong choice. I've seen that lots and lots of times. Sometimes people just get enamored with a product. They don't realize that the features of that product are duplicated and a lot of other vendors have the exact same thing. So going on gut feel tends to lead to an incorrect choice. You need a systematic approach for comparing vendors and products. And so what I recommend to people is using some kind of scorecard, something mathematical. Put a score against your requirements and put a score against how your vendors meet that requirement so that you can take the subjectivity out of it. Okay. So that will take you a lot closer to identifying the right vendor for your technology solution. Now, this approach is a little bit longer than just jumping on the first technology you hear about. It may not feel like you're acting quick, but you will get a much better return on investment. So I'm going to share with you some of the unintuitive results that I have worked with my clients to get using this exact method. So you can get a sense of what can happen. So we had one manufacturing company that realized their current software costs could actually be reduced by $4,000 annually by adopting a full functioning ERP system. So you think about it, most people who want to adopt something as complex as an end-to-end business management software solution like an ERP system are expecting to pay a lot more annually. But as it turned out, this particular client had so many ad hoc and smaller pieces of software that were disconnected, they could replace all of that with an ERP, and guess what? They would pay less annually. Now, I'm not even including the ROI that they would get just from, labor hours saved from people being able to do things quickly. I'm just talking strict software costs. That's a pretty unintuitive result that people wouldn't expect. I had another IT organization, and they found they could reduce service interruptions by 60% while simultaneously increasing system changes by 50% through better ticketing and project management systems and processes. We identified that they needed better escalation processes and so on. And we put processes and we put in systems, and we were actually able to, reduce their downtime while actually increasing the number of changes they were doing on their systems annually, which is phenomenal. Again, two counterintuitive metrics that are both getting better, where normally you would have to sacrifice one for the other, right? So that's a second example. And recently I had a fantastic experience with a metal manufacturer, and they realized that they could get a 40% reduction in lead time without automating their metal plating equipment as they had assumed. So they actually called us in to figure out what kind of metal plating equipment and automation do we need. That was actually what we were hired to do. We took our systematic approach, we did the process mapping, and we identified that there was a very simple inventory management solution they could put in place that would actually get rid of 40% of their lead time. And we were able to show them with math, with data, that the capacity of their tool was not the issue, that they really had a process issue that they didn't realize. So you can get a lot of unintuitive results if you follow a systematic approach like the one I outlined earlier. So what are some of the ingredients I talked about? I talked about Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is composed of a lot of different and analytical tools, but just a few that I touched on and worked on for these examples I shared with you. Voice of the customer analysis, value stream assessment. So that's an end-to-end business assessment of processes, process mapping skills, root cause analysis skills, data analysis skills. All of this comes together when you're trying to follow the breadcrumbs of your business problems. Technology requirement, how to translate that from understanding a business problem to making it a requirement. That too is a kind of skill. Vendor scorecard, we talked about having a systematic approach, putting some math around it. How do you do that, right? And sometimes this can all involve conversational techniques, because not everyone's going to be on board or see things your way. And it often requires some kind of awareness training. So we do a lot of that kind of training as well to educate people, like, here are the different options, and this is what these fancy words mean. And that can also be a really important part of technology adoption. So I'm hoping that with what I've given you here today, you'll be able to take a stab at your next technology adoption in a very concrete method. It also helps sometimes to have a guide. So if you are going to get someone to help you with this, here's a couple of things to look for. You want to look for some people who have hands-on experience. You want a seasoned facilitator, okay? Because there are going to be controversies and conversations where you want someone to smooth that over and be a neutral third party. You need an effective trainer, because they're going to be training you on what these technologies are and what they mean and educating you. You want a passionate problem solver, someone who's going to go deep and get to the bottom of the problem. You want someone who's unwilling to conform. So they're not looking for just the pat answer, and they're going to go and try to figure out what's the right solution for your business. And they have some kind of systematic approach to convince you about the right way to do it. They're not trying to sell you on some emotional, I have experience type of conversation. They're trying to sell you on, hey, I have a logical way to do this. and they've got that systematic approach to be convincing. Okay, so that are just some of the things that you can look for in a guide. And that's pretty much everything I have to share with you guys today. If you're interested in contacting us, my contact information is here. And I will turn it back over to Colin, who's going to take us to the next step.
Okay, well, thank you, Vani. That was very interesting. And I think that over the years, I've read a lot of business articles, and I've noticed that a lot of failures have been failures in business in things like folks putting out ERP systems. A lot of them seem to come back to a lot of what you have discussed today, that necessary research and planning before going ahead with their implementation. So thank you for that, for your inputs on that. And without further ado, I'm going to invite Igor to take over and tell us a little bit about how we can pay for all of these wonderful projects. Igor.
Sounds great, Colin. Thank you. So let me just share my presentation and we will get started right away. So 1 second. Here we go. And thanks, Vani, for a very interesting presentation. I can certainly relate to that. We are one of the examples of the business that started with one system, then added the second one, then added the third one, and then the fourth one.
Yeah, it's very common. We see that a lot, so I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah. So it's historical, but yeah, now we have to do something with it. anyway, let me get started by first of all thanking everybody who is attending today. My name is Igor Chigrin. I'm a owner of Fair Grant Writing, and we've been around since 2013, primarily focused on helping Canadian companies, manufacturers, technology companies, and agri-food businesses to get all sorts of government funding, government grants, loans, tax credits, and all of those interesting subsidies that the government recently launched. Our mission is to help Canadian companies to grow and thrive by unlocking their access to the government funding. And we've been able to secure millions of dollars to our clients in different forms of government funding. And our process is set up the way that our clients set up minimum amount of time with us, allowing them to spend more time on their business activities. A couple of cases that we are proud of. We've secured $3 million to an aerospace manufacturer in Vaughan, Ontario, in a form of an interest-free loan. We also secured over $300,000 in government grants to a metal fabrication plant in Kitchener that used this funding to expand the plant. But this is not the limit. In fact, if you are creative enough with the government funding strategy, you can get all the way up to this number. I like the story. It's not our client, but this company, a particular food company in Winnipeg, secured over $100 million in a combination of grants, loans, interest-based loans from crown corporations, loans guaranteed by the government. So it was everything a bit and around government funding, but that's how much this particular company had secured. So there's no real limit to how much money you can get, but you should have a case. And we'll talk about the cases later on. You don't qualify for the government funding just because your business exists. You always have to have an eligible case that the government wants to fund. Let's focus today, though, on the government funding for technology, implementation, adoption, and assessment. We'll start with assessment first. And for our participants in Ontario, I want to highlight the program called CME Technology Assessment. This one only is limited to the assessment portion and pays for the time the consultant comes in to review your processes, help you out with your requirements, and in the end, provide recommendations with what that system should be. that will help you to improve your productivity or your processes. And currently the program provides 100% of the consultant's costs, up to a maximum of $25,000. Now, this program is currently not accepting applications waiting for a new intake, but the new intake should start sometime this spring. Just a remark, we are at the beginning of the new government fiscal year, so we will see that a lot across this presentation, that some of the programs will start applications later this spring, just because this is how the government funding cycle works. For those of participants who are in Atlanta, they have almost similar program that's called Advanced Manufacturing Technology Assessment. The only difference is that that program provides 75% of the assessment cost, up to a maximum of $50,000. Let's now look at the training funding, because successful technology implementation always requires a good training, and sometimes the training expenses could be as much as the software or technology expenses. So there are a couple of good programs that can help you offset the cost of training. First and foremost, Canada Job Grant. It's the federal program that businesses across Canada can apply for. In Ontario, it's called Canada Ontario Job Grant. In Alberta, it's called Canada Alberta Job Grant, and so on and so forth. There are a little bit different names in Atlantic provinces, in Quebec. In BC, it's called BC Training Grant, but you got the point. So there could be different names, but this program functions exactly similarly across Canada. The program provides between 50% and 100% of the training expenses, up to a maximum of $15,000. But in a more generic case, when you train your employees, the maximum will be between 50% and 83%, and the maximum amount will be $10,000. The good thing about this program is that the government doesn't dictate what kind of training you should take and who should take the training. There's just a limitation for training company owners. In fact, they don't qualify, but the regular employees, they do qualify. So technology training is a good example of eligible training that you can get the money for. If you're in Ontario and you are a manufacturer, there is another program called Yves Landry Foundation's AIM. Currently, it's called AIM at Home, because we all are, at home, though, except for those, of course, that have to, be at the production floor. The program provides between 25 and 50% of the training expenses, up to a maximum of $100,000. Unlike the Canada Job Grant that only provides the money towards the trainers' fees, third-party trainer fees, this program also provides funding for the salaries and wages of employees while they are on training. And the more complex the system is, the more time it takes the employees to learn it. So this program is very beneficial for those large-scale system implementations. Let's talk now about the funding for software and hardware implementation. Now, the reason we split those two groups is because there are some grants that are only for training, and there are grants that cover pretty much everything from software or hardware acquisition all the way through customization, implementation, and the labor training. One of the examples of this is Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program. Although you'll see agricultural in its name, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's only for farmers. It's for the entire agri-food sector. So, for example, food and beverage manufacturers, cannabis producers and processors, they also qualify. And the intake dates vary from province to province, but in general, you can get 35% of the software or hardware implementation expenses, up to a maximum of $100,000. Once again, you have to be in farming or food processing or beverage. So if you are in one of those industries, this program is for you. If you are in the automotive industry, and if you are in Ontario, there's a special initiative from the Ontario government to help modernize the automotive industry in the province. It's not for, OEMs like, Chryslers of the world or, Fords of the world. It's actually for small to medium-sized suppliers to the automotive industry. And the purpose of the program is, again, to help them implement hardware or software solutions. And the program provides 50% of the expenses of the IT implementation project, up to a maximum of $100,000. Quebec has a similar program called SME in Action, or PMO en Action in French. They provide 40% of the software project expenses, up to a maximum of $50,000. Similar programs exist in Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland and Labrador. So more or less the same scope of eligible expenses, but just a little bit different percentage of the reimbursement. And the cherry on top, something that is coming soon, the new program that we have noticed in the federal budget announcement that was just on Monday. The new program will be called Canada Digital Adoption Program. And it will have two streams. One stream for so-called Main Street businesses. Main Street businesses are typically small to medium-sized retail, non-chain, non-franchise stores, restaurants, facilities such as gyms, bookstores, and basically all of the small to medium-sized mom-and-pop shops and restaurants that you see every day when you walk through your neighborhood. The program will provide them with the micro grants to develop the websites and e-commerce tools. Of course, if they don't have them, there might be some funding for social media marketing as well, but we'll have to see what exact rules will be. Micro grants typically mean that they will get up to $10,000. But again, this program is in the works. We'll have to wait for a couple of months to see the particular rules and amounts. But what we know from the budget is that there will be also a manufacturing and food processing stream. That tells us that this money will be also available for manufacturers across Canada and food processors across Canada. The program will provide the grants for technology assessment and selection. But as far as the implementation, acquisition of technology, software and hardware, fortunately or unfortunately, it will be not a grant, but it will be an interest-free loan, which is still a good idea because you save huge on interest. And typically the government, the government is not really a bank. When the government provides you with the interest-free loan, they typically don't require any collateral. So it's very beneficial. And what else? There are other purposes of funding. I mean, other types of projects that the government can fund. And keep in mind that sometimes your IT projects may be part of the other projects. For example, if you are expanding your business, especially in manufacturing, if you are expanding the plant, the technology project may be part of your expansion, and those IT or technology expenses can be built into your expansion project and be reimbursed through one of the expansion grants. But other than that, the government provides money also for export business development, for research and development, for equipment purchasing, and improving productivity. We covered skills training, and also the government has some money for hiring employees under 30 years old. If you are interested in the Canadian government funding and what specific programs your business may qualify for, I recommend you to fill out a free eligibility check form on our website. You see this link on the slide, but we will also include it into the follow-up email in the recording of the presentation. What it gives you is that the list, sorry, when you fill it out, we'll get back to you in a couple of days with a list of particular programs your business may qualify for, depending on the location of the business, the industry, and most importantly, what your goals are. Because, as I said, the government funding is not available just because, right? Because your business exists. It only is available when your business is eligible and when it has the eligible project. On that note, I wanted to conclude my presentation and turn it back to Colin for questions and answers.
All right, thank you very much, Igor. I think that provided us with quite a bit of very interesting information about what opportunities are there for us as business people to be able to build our businesses. And I would think that, or I would hope that we're going to have a lot of questions coming from the audience, especially regarding some of those new programs. While I'm in the process of getting everyone's mics unmuted, what I would ask you, Igor, if you could tell us a little bit more about some of these new programs, particularly those that are going to affect really small businesses. If you have any idea of some of the rules that are going to be governing that, or is there any guidance that we're awaiting from the government on that?
Yeah, so there's lots of changes in both provincial budgets and federal budget. Lots of promises, lots of new programs. First of all, I think what's important for the business community to know is that the emergency subsidies will be extended to September, almost actually October. And then there will be also another wage subsidy introduced to supplement the emergency wage subsidy. That program will start applications in June of 2021, and it is expected that it will be continued through November. So hopefully, by the end of November, we'll all get through this pandemic, and hopefully all the business will be back on track. Yeah, there will be there are also other updates. I just don't want to take time from Vani and from our participants to ask questions related to the subject. But next week, we will have another webinar where we will cover all of those new programs that were announced in the budgets.
Yes. All right. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I have given you all the ability to go ahead and unmute your microphones and ask any questions that you may have for us. All right.
Or I guess if you're comfortable, you can just type your questions in.
Yes. Yes, as Igor was saying, or just put your questions in the chat and I can pick them up from there. All right. All right. I know that looking specifically at what Building Perspectives does, and Igor, this question is for you. Building Perspectives is a professional services company, and I know that one of the major components of getting in new software, any new systems, be it plant, machinery, even just opening up a new branch, where you're going to be hiring a professional services firm, does that particular service qualify for grant funding?
Yes, yes. If this business is if this service is about to be purchased by a qualified company, yeah, it will be eligible. If it's a manufacturer, I'd say the best start will be CME program because it provides 100% of those expenses. It's a good start.
Okay. And we have a question from our audience. Lionel Johnson is asking, are there any grants available for startups?
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, there's not a lot available to startups, just because, when the government, puts out the government money, it's basically taxpayers' money. So when they do that, when they launch those programs, they want to make sure that the government will get a return. So investing in startups is risky. That's why most of the grants are only for those companies that were around for at least a year and have revenue.
Okay. And that raises an important point. If someone is seeking grant funding, I would hasten to point out that be sure that you have your company records, especially your financial records, all in order. It may come up as, or probably will come up as one of the important points that the government is going to ask about before giving you the grant. For Vani, I would ask you, from your practice, what would you identify as one of the, if there is such a thing as a single point of failure that happens when people are implementing new systems and new technologies?
Yeah, so it's a very wise question, Colin. I tend to think that not having the right people on the bus is the single point of failure, not having the right expertise. So what I see sometimes is everyone's got the right project management tools, and they've got a plan, and they put it all together, and everybody's in action. But the people filling out the plan didn't, have the right expertise to fill it out right, if you know what I mean. And that can really take you down the wrong path. So having some people who've done it before, especially if it's a big implementation, and they're really helping you to fill that spreadsheet in, can make it or break it.
And I remember from my own time across many corporations that there is often a desire in upper management to get these new systems in right now, get it done, get it done yesterday. Yes. And I know that builds the case for patients. But what do you as an IT manager talking to your boss, what do you say to your boss?
Yeah, you've got to have that conversation. Do you want it done now, or do you want it done right? And there's a big difference between the two, and it's really costly to go down the rushing path. I'm all for, not elongating it to an unreasonable degree, but people are implementing these technologies alongside doing their regular work every day. So you can spend, maybe 20-30% of your time on implementing something new, but 80% of the time you're spending doing your day-to-day activities. And that's the mindset people should take when taking on a big project, right? That folks are doing other things as well. And so when you resource plan, don't just think it's 3 headcount. Like, really take into account it's 3 headcount that had a full-time job before they started this. And you might need some additional resources who are dedicated and so on to really meet a aggressive timeline, right? So I think that's a very important point.
Right. And I know, and my next question is going to be for Igor. And ladies and gentlemen in the audience, please feel free to jump in at any point. You can either put your questions in the chat or unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask. But Igor, I know that a big part of what happens with projects that Vani might not be managing is that if people are not doing their proper due diligence in these programs, there might be a degree of scope creep. Now, if they're getting this financed through a grant, what does the government say about scope creep with regards to grant financing? Will grant financing help to cover that, or have they just simply dug themselves a deeper hole?
Yeah, unfortunately, in most cases, it's the latter scenario. When you apply for the government funding, you have to specify exactly how much money you're going to spend. And then if you end up spending more money, unfortunately, it's your problem, and the government does not top up what's been approved. So good project management is definitely required such projects, especially if they're funded by the government.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, and then my reply to that would be talk to Vani. Have a long talk with Vani before you get going on your project.
Thanks, Colin.
I know a few questions that came through Q&A as well.
Oh, I hadn't seen those. Thank you.
It's all right.
Okay, so Richard Mallet asks, we are looking at implementing software to implement the order entry and AP function, data entry. Is there funding for that?
General answer is yes, but we'll have to look specifically into a few variables just to because for sure there's a funding for training in adoption of that order entry system. Richard, I think we spoke before. Shoot me the quote from the vendor if you have it, and then I'll double check and we'll highlight exactly what's currently available. But also, if it's not a rush for you, you can wait for a couple of months for that digital adoption program to kick in. Based on what we know about the digital adoption program, those expenses will be covered.
Okay, thank you, Igor. And Shazaya asks, how about the beauty industry, especially folks who are looking to purchase new machinery? Are there any grants that would be specific to them?
Good question. When it comes to the new machinery grants, typically those grants are limited, at least what's available now and what was available before. Those grants were limited to the production industries, like all sorts of manufacturing, including food and beverage. As far as the beauty industry and pretty much every other industry that is a service by nature but needs equipment or need to be physically in a certain premises, like for example fitness clubs, there is an alternative program that's called Canada Small Business Financing Program. It's a loan, but 85% of the amount of the loan is guaranteed by the government. So, Shazia, that's the alternative option that's available for you at this time. Canada Small Business Financing Program. You can either talk about it to us, we can give you general guidelines about what this program is, or you can talk to your bank account manager. Every single bank in Canada has this program, and they should be also in a good position to tell you how to apply and what kind of tips and tricks there are in the program.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Igor, and thank you, Shazaya. Igor, question for you from Cohen. He is asking, are grants available to other territories outside of Canada?
If I understand the question correctly, the question is about marketing to other territories. So first of all, every single government around the world has grants. So if you are asking Cohen about the grants outside Canada for, say, businesses outside Canada, most likely yes. We just don't focus on them, but United States, every state in the US, for example, has a set of grant programs. Anyways, going back to Canada, what if I understand your question correctly? There are grants that help Canadian companies market themselves outside Canada in other countries and territories. That program is called Can Export. It wasn't part of this presentation because it's unrelated to the technology. But the program provides 75% of the export marketing budget, and export marketing could include things like advertising, digital advertising of your company, of your Canadian company outside Canada. Could be US, could be Mexico, anywhere in the world. So the government doesn't dictate you where your market is.
Okay, thanks, Igor. And I know that program, Can Export, has been something that a lot of folks have been asking about in recent months, certainly. And I would say I am no economist or great business consultant, but I would say that as the pandemic comes to an end, that means that there will be new opportunities open for a lot of folks. And if you are prepared, perhaps you may be able to pursue your fortune in other markets as well. So with that, we have come to 1 p.m. and we normally close off at this point. So I'm going to give the opportunity of one last question. If anyone has one last question, and then we will wind up for the day. So going once, twice. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon. It has been our pleasure to host you. And thanks especially to our presenters, Vani Pasupathy, Managing Partner of Building Perspective. Thank you for your presentation. We've been very happy to have you. You're most welcome. And thank you to Igor Chigrin, Principal of Fair Grant Writing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.